Hi there guys, and welcome to another edition of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. Carrying on with the draft review series today, this episode will be focusing on the NFC South. So going to begin, if you want to see more thoughts on the draft in general, check out some of the other videos, but just going to begin with the Atlanta Falcons, hop straight on in and get to their first round draft pick. They traded up to get Takk McKinley with the 26th overall selection, the pass rusher from UCLA. I understand the selection. I'm not sure the trade was necessary. There were several players on the board at that point. Personally, I don't think McKinley was the best of them. Clearly, the Falcons put a lot more stock in him as opposed to, TJ Watt, some of the other guys that were around. It's a solid selection. They definitely needed another outside rusher to complement Vic Beasley. I'm just not a huge fan of the trade, nor the particular prospect, personally. I feel they could have looked at guard at this point. I think Forrest Lamp would have been an absolutely perfect pick for them to keep that offensive front strong, keep that offense humming along. So I'm not particularly impressed with this pick, even though I do feel he will certainly be given an opportunity early and could make this defence a lot better. Much happier with the pick they made at 75, or at least I would be if I was a Falcons fan. Duke Riley from LSU. Thought this was a good range for him. I thought he could easily have gone in round 2. He'll give them far more athleticism, and him and Deion Jones could be a very good pair for this team in the linebacking core for years to come. So I'm a really big fan of that selection. Then they've gone with Sean Harlow, a guard from Oregon State. Not particularly familiar with him. Makes sense, I say. Losing Chris Chester, there was a need at guard, so I suspect he will certainly get an opportunity there, possibly make an early impact. Then with pick 149, DeMonte Casey, a corner from San Diego State. They're pretty solid at corner. Of course, Trufant with the extension. Jay Orford I can only assume is a depth section, which is fine. You can never have too many corners. This roster's not got a huge amount of holes, so I understand that pick. Brian Hill, another running back from Wyoming with pick 156. I'm surprised he was available at this juncture. I thought this was a guy that could have gone as high as round 3. I think he's a good inside the tackles runner. I think he'll be a great insurance, running back insurance for Devonta Freeman. I think that was great value, and I think this is a really solid pick. And then tight end Eric Sober, I'm guessing that's how it's pronounced, from Drake. Again, not too familiar there. They've not got a huge amount there. Hoping on young guys developing. He might be able to compete with Hooper for some time. Who knows? From what I've been able to gather, just an athletic pass-catching tight end prospect. So we'll see if he ends up making any contribution. In terms of this draft, if I ignore my dislike for the Takk McKinley pick, I think this is a really solid draft. I think they've done a good job addressing the needs that they've got. The linebacking, the defence is definitely better. I think the Duke Riley pick is great. Getting another guard to compete, I think that was essential. They need to keep adding some youth to that group because it's a bit older on the interior. So I think that keeping that maintained, the offensive line was fantastic last year, is a big thing. And I think the Brian Hill pick was absolutely fantastic. So as a whole, I think a solid job. If Takk McKinley had been, they hadn't traded, I'd have been a lot happier with it. I just feel it was a bit unnecessary considering what options were available to them at the time. But I think this team is one of those that certainly has improved itself for next season. There'll be a couple of impact players there. As I say, Duke Riley, Takk McKinley will certainly have an opportunity to start right away, you would think. Moving on now to the Carolina Panthers, who were picking a lot earlier this year after representing in the Super Bowl the previous. Christian McCaffrey at 8 from Stanford, the running back. Is going to make that offense look far more dangerous, I think. I can understand the need for a running back. I may be a bit iffy personally with taking running back that high outside of maybe Fournette in Jacksonville, because I think that's really going to transform that entire offense. This one, though, however, could have that similar kind of effect. In Newton's time there, they've not had this kind of durable, all-purpose back. Jonathan Stewart, even when he was at his best, is still very much an inside runner but doesn't offer the diversity in terms of, the receiving skill that McCaffrey possesses is off the charts. So this gives them a very dangerous weapon. I was discussing this previously. I actually think there's a good chance that we'll see McCaffrey used all over the field. They don't have an outstanding slot-type receiver in that team. Of course, Ted Ginn's now gone. He was essentially the third receiver last season. I think McCaffrey will be used a lot in that role. I still think Jonathan Stewart's going to see a lot of snaps, so I'd expect to see McCaffrey used maybe 10 to 12 run plays, and then I think there'll be some stuff designed for him in this screen game and also as a wideout. So from that perspective, I think he really does help this offense. I would have liked to have seen the team go defense. I do think this is a solid pick, but I think with Derek Barnett on the board, I think he'd have been a really good selection. I do feel like end was a much bigger need considering the quality of depth at running back. Don't be wrong, they weren't going to get anyone who's going to be as high impact as McCaffrey in all likelihood later on. But I feel like maybe if they'd got, say, Alvin Kamara a bit later, they could have had a similar kind of effect. But it's a decent pickup. Certainly makes this offense a lot more interesting heading into next season, and it'll certainly be interesting to see how he's used. He's certainly going to be one of the more fascinating players to follow in the 2017 season. And with their second selection, they selected Curtis Samuel, pick number 40, wide receiver from Ohio State. I think this is a good range for him. Certainly a pick I could have expected. They need some speed in that receiver core. Funchess and Benjamin are solid possession type receivers, but someone who can offer a bit more of a downfield threat, a bit more quickness. I could certainly see Samuel, if he can develop quickly, becoming this team's number 2. Funchess wasn't particularly effective last year in my opinion, so I think there's definitely opportunity there. I think this is a real solid pick. There was a need there at receiver specifically for this type of receiver, and I think it's a good range, so I'm a big fan of this selection. Round 3, the Patriots pick in round 2, Taylor Mouton, the offensive tackle from Western Michigan. O-line is the biggest need this team had. I do think this is a very, very good selection. I would maybe have liked to have seen them go O-line when they picked Samuel, but I do understand why they have done what they've done. I think Samuel's perfectly fine. I don't know if we're going to be able to see him start. This is a very developmental kind of class with the O-lineman, but it had to be done. They did need to get a body in. Maybe. I think the range is solid. It's a fine pick. My concern more just lies with that line as a whole. I don't think this guy's going to be enough of a difference maker to change things, but it's a perfectly fine pick once again. Then another need pick, Deshaun Hall, defensive end from Texas A&M. They traded up to get him, giving up another 4th rounder. Not sure I like that as a move. I think there were guys ranked similarly that were still available. Maybe could have sat. I think getting throwing 2 pass rushes in that kind of range at the wall and seeing what stuck may have been a better idea. I do think he's an okay player. He'll probably get an opportunity to develop. I'd expect Johnson's going to be one of their primary every down ends. Peppers may well be as well. I wouldn't be surprised with anything with that guy, even at his advanced age. So we'll see what happens there. Could certainly end up being a solid pick. Then had to wait a while after this. Pick 152, Corn Elder, a cornerback from Miami. Not particularly familiar with him. Apparently used to play some running back. Developmental prospect. This is a position they could have again looked to address earlier. I'm happy with the early picks. We'll see what happens if they can bring him along, if he can contribute. Again, this position does not look great, although I do think Bradbury and Worley really did improve as the season went along. Then a fullback in pick 192. Always going to be dubious of a fullback being drafted unless they look very, very good. So I'm going to question that one. And then a kicker with pick 233. And once again, it's a kicker unless they're very, very good. And by all accounts, I've seen a lot of people were surprised that he was even taken. I would have to be critical of this one. On the whole, though, this draft is a strange one where I like the prospects. I'm just not sure it attacked what I consider the biggest needs. The team is certainly far more explosive offensively with the Samuel and McCaffrey selections. I do feel like this defence has been sort of starting to decline, or started to show signs of decline last year. I think it might have been nice to maybe get Barnett early on, look to become more explosive later in the draft when there were more options available. Newton's certainly going to be happy with the new weapons at his disposal. Hopefully for them, Moton will work out, or Mooten will work out, and they'll have some better protection for him. Definitely makes him more dangerous. Whether the same issues that we saw last year will still crop up, because I think expecting a pair of third rounders and some late round picks to address what I think were the bigger needs, and I would definitely like to have seen more than one lineman taken. It seems iffy to me at best, but certainly a productive draft. I think it's fine. I don't love it, but it's by no means a bad one. The team has gotten better, so it's just, I suppose, not to my taste. Moving on to the New Orleans Saints. So this is one of the teams with 2 first-round picks, and pick 11, they had the best corner in the draft, in my opinion, fall into their lap in Marshawn Lattimore from Ohio State. I think this is a home run selection. I did not expect him to be on the board at this point. A lot of teams with corner needs. I guess due to the depth at the position, maybe some teams overlooked that somewhat, but I do think this was one of the top prospects in this entire draft. Great selection at that point, fills the needs, can't complain there. However, pick 32, Ryan Ramczyk, the offensive tackle from Wisconsin. This is a pick I'm not as sure about. They do need a tackle for the future. I believe it's Zach Streif playing right tackle at the minute. He's older. This is clearly, being a player they're planning to groom and bring in perhaps in 2018 to start in his place. And that, from that side of things, I can understand it, but this is still a pretty stout O-line. The offense as a whole is fine. I think there were a lot of prospects on the board that could have really helped. A guy like Zach Cunningham could potentially help. Apparently they were looking at Reuben Foster. Even a guy like Jordan Willis, although that might have been overdrafting him at that point, considering where he ended up going. But there were definitely options that I think would have been far more helpful for this team next year. This defence is still going to be bad. One rookie corner is not going to make a huge difference. Bringing in Marcus Williams at pick 42. Slightly dubious about picking up a safety. I'm not a big fan of Kenny Vaccaro. I'm thinking this might suggest that he's going to be somewhat expendable, because of course Von Bell was a second round selection last year, and I thought he played quite well as a rookie. So I would have to assume that Williams is going to be there. They may use him in the slot, who knows. Maybe they'll move Vaccaro around a bit, use him as sort of a down in the box linebacker safety hybrid. I like the player. I just think there were safeties I preferred on the board at this juncture. Obi Melifonwu being chief among them, who I thought could have easily went at the end of round 1. And it's also, it's a need in that if you don't rate Vaccaro. So it makes sense from that perspective. An okay pick. Again, not in love with the prospect, considering what options were available. Then, surprisingly, they traded up to get Alvin Kamara. Now, I am a huge fan of Alvin Kamara. Huge fan. I mocked him in the first. I thought a team would fall in love with him in the same way I did watching him on film. However, they gave up a second rounder from the following next year's draft to get him. And whilst I think he certainly feels a need within that offense, they don't really have a dynamic pass catching back. Adrian Peterson's never been there, even in his prime. Ingram's okay in that regard, but he's certainly not explosive enough to, I think, concern a team coming out of the backfield. This is a mixed bag selection where I love the value, I love the player, I don't love the trade. And again, this team is okay at running back. Sean Payton, I sometimes just think he can't resist. He's clearly, like, the Ramczyk and Kamara picks, they've got his fingerprints 100% all over them. And this offense didn't necessarily need that help this year. So yeah, a strange one, kind of like the opposite of the Williams one, where in this case I love the prospect. I'm just a bit dubious about the trade. I think it's a horrible trade, considering the lack of need at running back. But you never know. I suppose Ingram and Peterson could both be gone in fairly short order. In that case, it makes a lot more sense. But still, I just question the decision process there in New Orleans. Alex Anzalone with pick 76, a linebacker from Florida. Finally, an actual linebacker who can run. That's going to be something I've not seen in New Orleans in a while. So that should be good. Had a lot of injuries. I think that's the big worry there. But he's a pretty good player. I like the range. So we'll see if they can actually bring this guy along and if he can contribute early. Then got Trey Hendrickson with pick 103, defensive end. They definitely needed more line help. This guy's got great physical skill set. Whether he'll be able to contribute next year, I'm not necessarily sure. I'm sure that definitely an opportunity there, but I think this is a really solid pick. Big fan of this one. And then Al Qadim Mohammed, defensive end from Miami, with pick 196. Not particularly familiar with this guy. From what I've gathered, he's made a lot of bad decisions, so surprised he was drafted. But the Saints draft, really big fan of a lot of the players they've taken. As I say, Marcus Williams is a player I'm fine with. I do think there were better safeties there. Ramchik's okay in this kind of range. I don't actually think this defence has gotten significantly better when the opportunity for it to be so was certainly there. Needed to beef up the pass rush. I don't think that's happened based on this year. Getting one linebacker helps, but I think they needed a couple of players at that spot. The two offensive players, again, love Kamara. Just a little deuce about this. Is a really hard draft for me to grade. I think if it was most other teams, this would be a great looking draft. But I just feel this team needed to put more of an edge on defence. I'm going to edge with good just because I do think they've got a lot of decent players out of this. I just don't think it's going to pan out this season. I still think this defence looks very flawed. Yeah, they've done an okay job there. It's just maybe try and rein in Sean Payton a little bit. I really don't like that trade, and losing the second round next year I think could be big, especially if this defence continues to struggle again, because next year, down another pick, they may not have an opportunity to get too much better in that regard. Moving on to final team in the division, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who've actually been lauded for their drafting this year, which is something I'm certainly not used to. Pick 19, this one was a bit of a surprise for a lot of people. I did somewhat think this may happen. I think I had OJ Howard being taken one pick above the Buccaneers in my mock, and the simple fact there is positional value. I don't think this was a huge need for the Bucs, but considering the talent level of the player, I think this has to go down as a very solid pickup. The Buccaneers do use a lot of two tight end sets. This will allow them to use Cameron Brate as their move tight end. You'd suspect Howard will be in line most of the time. In theory, should be a dominant player within a couple of seasons. Certainly helps this pass game. Could certainly be very, very dangerous. They've got good numbers there now and good depth. Yeah, this is just one of those. Definitely not the biggest need, but probably the top player on the board at that point. So I can't critique the Bucs, even though I was hoping for Malik Hooker. I really was. Pick 50, Justin Evans, safety from Texas A&M. Safety's been a need in Tampa for a long time. Hopefully, obviously it's been addressed. Keith Tandy played well toward the end of last year. I think he's more of a free safety type. Evans is a strong safety, hitter of a player. Again, I would have preferred Melifonwu. I think he'd been a better fit. I think he's got a bit more diversity to him. Clearly, they've brought in Evans, thinking they've got the free safety spot filled. I think in between Wilcox or Tandy, I think they're happy with one of those two guys to get that job. I don't know if they're necessarily going to be starting with Evans right away. I think the Wilcox Tandy safety tandem sound clumsy. That could potentially be the starting group I think safety's not the easiest spot to come in and play right away. But he's made the team far more athletic at that position. Chris Conte has been playing there, so anyone who's watched Chris Conte knows that the guy is certainly not the fastest. So this is a solid move, reasonable pick in the range. I think this is the right kind of spot for him. Team needed the safety, so solid pick. Not in love with it, but fine. Chris Godwin with pick 84, the wide receiver from Penn State. This is a really good move. I didn't think Godwin would be available at this point. I think this is much like the OJ Howard pick, where I think he must have just been very high on the team's board. The team did need another wide receiver. I just don't feel like it was an immediate need. I think this guy's going to be the number 2 in the future. Eventually, Deshaun Jackson is not long for Tampa. I wouldn't think that type of player tends to age badly. They've got Humphreys as a slot receiver, Evans as the number 1. So I don't know if he'll be expected to contribute too much early, but it does give them a bit of depth. You can always do some insurance in case of injuries, and he could develop into a very, very good player. Decent speed. Again, this is something the Buccaneers have lacked on offense. Certainly improved in that regard with the Howard and Godwin selections. And for the future, I think this is a really, really sound selection. Good value. Good pick. Kendall Beckwith with pick 107. I'm very dubious about this one. I liked everything the Bucs did up until this point. The fact they traded up for a player who's torn an ACL, so probably won't be able to contribute next year. And I also don't consider linebacker a huge need. I think in Quan Alexander and Levante David, you've got 2 above average starters at the position. And in today's NFL, you play a lot of nickel. Trading up to get a guy coming off an injury position, it's not a huge need. I don't like this pick personally. Would like to see the team stand pat. There's still a lot of depth issues on this team. Pick 162, Jeremy McNichols, running back from Boise State. This makes a lot of sense. They need a scat type back. Charles Sims is good in third down situations, but he's not quite explosive enough. I think this gives them another option in that regard. So again, more team speed here. Good range, I think. It'll be interesting to see if he can contribute early on in his time in Tampa. Again, this team has got a lot faster on offense. And then Steve Tuipulotu, I think I did a good job with that one. Defensive tackle from USC with pick 223. I guess he'll be brought in to be a nose tackle in certain situations. Whether he contributes much, I'm not sure. Pick it this late in the draft. Who knows? So the Bucs draft is a strange one. This is something a bit of a running theme with this division. I haven't felt this way about a lot of the episodes I've done. Where really like the prospects. I like some of the value there. I just don't feel the team necessarily did a great job of addressing needs. Certainly got better, and this is a team, as a Bucs fan, I'm well aware this team just needs to improve its talent base overall. So from that perspective, I think it's a very, very good draft. OJ Howard was great value. I think Chris Godwin was great value. I think they'll both be really good picks that will help this team in the long run. However, my primary concerns being, I think the cornerback position is very, very thin. And I also think defensive line depth is lacking, and I think the team certainly could have done with a guard. So I don't feel those positions, they weren't addressed appropriately. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. Happy with the draft as a Bucs fan, so I have to say they've done a really good job. But there's certainly still some concerns in Tampa with regards to the needs that we had going in. So go through which draft I liked the most from this group. Probably have to go with Tampa, just in terms of the OJ Howard pick, the Chris Godwin pick. May not be immediate needs, but I do think the value they provide, and in terms of building a team around a young franchise quarterback, they will help significantly in the long term. And I think they generally did a pretty good job in terms of value throughout. Some high-end talent. Those first 3 picks I think are all really, really solid and will help and contribute. So in that regard, a good job. Number 2, probably go with the Panthers. I think that's a fairly similar situation there. Maybe didn't address all the biggest needs. However, again, this team is more explosive, faster. Curtis Samuel and McCaffrey certainly both contribute there. Again, they didn't address their O-line or their D-line too well, so that could cost them. But again, I like the picks they made. Ooh, and then behind that, I guess I'll bring in the Saints. And again, I like a lot of the players they got. I loved Kamara, really did. And I think getting the corner at 11 in Humphrey was superb. So yeah, solid there. It's just, as I say, I don't think they addressed their need, which is defence, effectively enough. And the Marcus Williams one's still a bit of a surprising one to me. And then the Falcons, and having them at the bottom here, there's not much in it between them and the Saints in particular. I think they've done a fine job as well. They are the team that I think attack their needs. This is just the team I'm most dubious on prospects. So really, I could put Atlanta far higher up in this. I don't think there's much between the three sort of. I think with Tampa, just the OJ Howard pick really is such significant value. They kind of have to go one here, and how much better the offense is. But I think all of these teams did a good job of adding talent. It's just maybe not so much addressing need. That's the one I'm going with. It's not the one I'm the most confident in. It doesn't feel very clear and defined compared to like when I've done some of the other divisions. But I think, the NFC South had a fascinating draft. Definitely got more explosive as a division offensively. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. So let me know, what do you guys think? Do you agree, disagree with any of my opinions? Any picks that you're particularly excited about or you loathed? Let me know, whether it's in the comments section down below. Whether it's on Facebook at Cover Zero or find me on Twitter at Simon Conboy. I'll do my utmost to get back in touch with each and every one who does make any contact. And as always, if you've enjoyed the show, like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, all that good stuff. It'd be greatly appreciated. And check out some more of them. I'll have the NFC and AFC West up tomorrow, wrapping up the draft review series. Start doing some more well, maybe not interesting, might be the wrong word. Some more unique stuff next week. So check those out. Thank you very much for watching. It's been a pleasure as always, and go Bucks.